On behalf of the Mothers Public School Khandagiri, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us to commemorate the United Nations Observation Day. It is heartwarming to see that the pandemic has not kept us away from celebrating our shared commitment to the values and the vision of the United Nations. Today, we celebrate the noble aspirations of the United Nations. The nations of the world commit to resolve their differences peacefully, to promote dignity and human rights, to foster social and economic development, to protect our environment, and to provide humanitarian aids in case of famine, natural disaster, and armed conflict. The United Nations, this organization that belongs to all of us, offers the best platform through which we, the citizens of the world, can pursue our fundamental aspirations of peaceful and sustainable human development. I thank you all for your kind attention and wish you a great day ahead.
Honorable Secretary General, distinguished delegates, guests and colleagues, a very good morning. It is an honor and privilege for me to welcome you all on behalf of United Nations to this UN Day celebration. United Nations, what is it all about? How it all started? Let me throw some light on this. United Nations is an international organization founded on 1945. It is currently made up of 193 member states. The mission and work of the United Nations are guided by the purposes and principles contained in its founding charter. The charter was signed on 26 June 1945 by the representatives of 50 countries. Poland, which was not represented at the conference, signed in later and became one of the official 51 member states. The United Nations came into existence on 24 October 1945 when the charter was ratified by China, France, the Soviet Union, United Kingdom, the United States and by a majority of other signatories. How it all started. In 1945, when the representatives of 50 countries met in San Francisco, they were faced with the world shattered by 6 years of war. Freedom, democracy and the rule of law had been preserved but at an unimaginable cost. That is why the UN Charter that the delegates signed into being that year was underpinned by 3 fundamental rights: peace, security, development and human rights. 75th anniversary of UN Charter. The year 2020 marks the 75th anniversary of United Nations and its founding charter. Today we face a global pandemic. People rightly raise their voice against racism. Confronting problems is a start, but we also have to solve them. We have a timeless guide to tackle our shared challenges and fix the world's fragilities. That guide is the United Nations Charter. The Charter was signed 75 years ago and its principles ring as just true today. Let us act together to defeat the pandemic, prevent climate catastrophe, uphold the equality of women and men, and pave the way for a safer, healthier, more just and sustainable world. On the United Nations 75th anniversary, we asked people around the world to share their vision on #TheWorldWeWant. This video highlights photos from the virtual exhibit #TheWorldWeWant, a special collection of 75 photos curated from more than 50,000 images from over 130 countries, illustrating our common hopes and dreams for the future. I wish everyone a happy United Nations Day. Thank you. First, I request Ms. Secretary General to speak a few lines.
Good morning, distinguished guests and countries' representatives. COVID-19 is not only a wake-up call, it is a dress rehearsal for the world of challenges to come. The pandemic has taught us that our choices matter. As we look to the future, let us make sure we choose wisely. Mr. President, Excellencies, in a world turned upside down, this General Assembly Hall is among the strangest sights of all. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed our annual meeting beyond recognition, but it has made it more important than ever. In January, I addressed the General Assembly and identified 4 horsemen in our midst. 4 threats that endanger our common future. First, the highest global geostrategic tension in years. Second, an extensional climate crisis. Third, deep and growing global mistrust. And fourth, the dark side of the digital world. But a 5th horseman was lurking in the shadows. Since January, the COVID-19 pandemic has galloped across the globe, joining the 4 other horsemen and adding to the fury of each. And every day the grim toll grows. Families grieve, societies stagger, and the pillars of our world wobble on already shaking footings. Rising inequalities, climate catastrophe, widening social division, rampant corruption. The pandemic has exploited these injustices, preyed on the most vulnerable, and wiped away the progress of decades. For the first time in 30 years, poverty is rising. Human development indicators are declining. We are coming off track in achieving sustainable development goals. Meanwhile, nuclear non-proliferation efforts are slipping away. We are failing to act in areas of emerging danger, particularly cyberspace. People are hurting, our planet is burning. Our world is struggling, stressed, and seeking real leadership and action. Excellencies, we face a foundational moment. COVID-19 is not only a wake-up call, it is a dress rehearsal for the world of challenges to come. We must move forward with humility, recognizing that a microscopic virus has brought the world to its knees. We must be united. We have seen when countries go in their own direction, the virus goes in every direction. We must act in solidarity, and we must be guided by science and tethered to reality. Too often there has been also disconnect between leadership and power. We see remarkable examples of leadership, but they are not usually associated with power. And power is not always associated with the necessary leadership. In an interconnected world, it's time to recognize a simple truth. Solidarity is self-interest. If we fail to grasp that fact, everyone loses. Excellencies, as the pandemic took hold, I called for a global ceasefire. We have exactly 100 days. There is only one winner of the conflict during a pandemic, the virus itself. My original appeal was endorsed by 180 member states along with religious leaders, regional partners, civil society networks, and others. Enormous obstacles stand in the way: deep mistrust, spoilers, and the weight of fighting that has festered for years. But we have reasons to be hopeful. In several situations, we have seen new ceasefires holding better than in the past, or in their absence, a standstill in the fighting. Excellencies, in areas where terrorist groups are particularly active, the obstacles to peace will be much more difficult to overcome. In Sahel and the Lake Chad region, we see the pandemic's overlapping health, socio-economic, political and humanitarian impacts at play. I am particularly concerned that terrorist and violent extremist groups will exfoliate the pandemic. And we must not forget the dramatic humanitarian cost of war. Now is the time for a collective new push for peace and reconciliation. And so I appeal for a stepped-up international effort led by the Security Council to achieve a global ceasefire by the end of this year. We have exactly 100 days. As I said, the clock is ticking. The world needs a global ceasefire to stop all hot conflicts. At the same time, we must do everything to avoid a new Cold War. Excellencies, the UN system led by the World Health Organization has supported governments, particularly in the developing world, to save lives and contain the spread of the virus. We have mobilized the whole UN system in development emergency mode, activated our UN country teams, and rapidly issued policy guidance to support governments. We are working to advance treatments and therapies as a global public good, and backing efforts for people's vaccine available and affordable everywhere. We need a collective commitment to avoid a downward spiral. Half of humanity is bearing the brunt of the social and economic consequences of COVID-19. Women are disproportionately represented in the sectors hit hardest by job losses. Women do most of the unpaid care work generated by the pandemic. Unless we act now, gender equality could be set back by decades. This is a hidden war on women. Preventing and ending it requires the same commitment and resources we devote to other forms of the warfare. We have the blueprints, the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the 2030 Agenda, and the Paris Agreement. Recovery needs to build resilience. Excellencies, I'm asking all countries to consider 6 climate positive actions as they rescue, rebuild, reset their economies. First, we need to make our societies more resilient and ensure a just transition. Second, we need green jobs and sustainable growth. Third, bailouts of industries, aviation and shipping should be conditional on aligning with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Fourth, end fossil fuel subsides. Fifth, take climate risk into account in all financial and policy decision making. Sixth, work together, leaving no one behind. A new global deal must be rooted in a fair globalization based on the rights and dignity of every human being, on a living balance in the nature, and on all responsibilities to future generations. Trade needs to be free and fair. Dear friends across the world, we cannot respond to this crisis by going back to what was or withdrawing into national selves. To overcome today's fragilities and challenges, we need to be more international cooperation, not less. Strengthen multilateral institutions, not a retreat from them. Better governments, global governments, not a chaotic free-for-all. The pandemic has abandoned the world, and that upheaval has created space for something new. Ideas once considered impossible are suddenly on the table. Large-scale actions no longer seem so daunting. In just months, billions of people have fundamentally changed how they work, consume, move, and interact. In commemorating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the General Assembly has invited me to report on our common agenda for the future. I welcome this opportunity for a process of profound reflection involving us all. Let us draw inspiration from our achievements across the history of the United Nations, and let us vanquish the 5 horsemen and build the world we need: peaceful, inclusive, and sustainable. The pandemic has taught us that our choices matter. As we look to the future, let us make sure we choose wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Secretary General, for your remarkable and actionable speech. Now I request the Prime Minister of India to speak a few lines.
Namaste, respected President of the General Assembly. On behalf of more than 1.3 billion people of India, I would like to congratulate every member state on the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. India is proud of the fact that it is one of the founding members of the United Nations. On this historic occasion, I have come to this global platform to share the sentiments of 1.3 billion people of India. Your Excellency, the world of 1945 was significantly different from today's world. The global situation, sources, resources, problem solutions, all were quite different. And as a result, the form and the composition of the United Nations established with the aim of global welfare were in accordance with the prevailing situation of those times. Today, we are in a completely different era. In the 21st century, the requirements and the challenges of our present as well as our future are vastly different from those of the past. Therefore, the international community today is faced with a very important question: whether the character of the institution constituted in the prevailing circumstances of 1945 is relevant even today. With the changing times, if we don't change, then the drive needed to bring the change will also get weakened. If we were to make an objective assessment of the performance of the United Nations over the last 75 years, we see several stellar achievements. One could say that we have successfully avoided a third world war. But we cannot deny that there have been several wars and many more civil wars. Several terrorist attacks shook the world, and the rivers of blood have continued to flow by. In these wars and in these attacks, the people who died, they are the people just like you and me. So many people have lost their entire life savings and have become homeless refugees. During those times and even today, can we suggest that the efforts of the United Nations to tackle these issues were sufficient? over the last 8 to 9 months, the whole world has been battling the pandemic of the coronavirus. Where is the United Nations in this joint fight against the pandemic? Where is its effective response? Your Excellency, reform in the responses, in the processes, and in the very character of the United Nations is the need of the hour. It is a fact that the faith and respect that the United Nations enjoys among the 1.3 billion people of India is unparalleled. But it is also true that the people of India have been waiting for a long time for the process for the reforms of United Nations to get completed. For how long will India be kept out of the decision-making structures of the United Nations? This is a country which is the largest democracy of the world. This is a country which has hundreds of languages, hundreds of dialects, many sects and many ideologies. This is a country which was a leading global economy for centuries and also one which has endured hundreds of years of foreign rule. Excellency, when we were strong, we were never a threat to the world. When we were weak, we never become a burden on the world. Your Excellency, how long would a country have to wait, particularly when the transformational changes happening in that country affect a large part of the world? Your Excellency, the ideals on which the United Nations was founded and India's own fundamental philosophy has lot of commonality. They are not different from each other. Within the halls of the United Nations, one has often heard the words, "The world is one family." We treat the whole world as one family. Your Excellency, following the mantra of reform, perform, transform, India has made great efforts to bring about transformation in the lives of millions of its citizens. In just about 4 to 5 years, India has brought over 400 million people into the formal financial sector. This was not an easy task, but India has proved that it can be done. Today, India is one of the leaders in digital transactions. Today, India is providing digital access to its millions of its citizens and in the process ensuring empowerment and transparency. Just a few days ago, India has initiated a huge project for connecting its 600,000 villages with broadband optical fiber. Your Excellency, in the changed circumstances of the post-pandemic era, we are moving forward with a vision of self-reliant India. A self-reliant India will also be a force multiplier for the global economy. Today, it is also being ensured that there is no discrimination in extending the benefits of all the schemes and initiatives to every citizen of the country. Large-scale efforts are being made in India to promote women entrepreneurship and leadership. Indian women today are the biggest beneficiaries of the largest microfinancing scheme of the world. Your Excellency, in its journey towards progress, India wants to learn from the world as well as share its own experiences with the world. I am confident that on the occasion of the 75th anniversary, the United Nations and its member countries will endeavor a strong commitment to maintain the relevance of this great institution. Stability in the United Nations and empowerment of the United Nations are essential for welfare of the world. On the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, let us once again pledge to dedicate ourselves for the welfare of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for your speech.
Now I request the Prime Minister of Pakistan to speak a few lines.
Mr. President, Secretary General Guterres, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to address the United Nations General Assembly once again. I congratulate His Excellency, Mr. Volkan Bozkır, on his election as the President of the 75th session of the General Assembly. We also appreciate the skillful leadership of the outgoing President, His Excellency Tijani Mohammed Band, especially during the COVID-19 crisis. We commend the leadership of Secretary General Antonio Guterres in these turbulent times. Mr. President, since my government assumed office, a consistent effort has been to fundamentally transform Pakistan. we envisage Naya Pakistan to be modeled on the principles of the state of Medina, established by a holy prophet. To achieve this goal, we need to have peace and stability. Thus, our foreign policy aims to have peace with our neighbors and settle disputes through dialogue. Mr. President, the 75th anniversary of the United Nations is an extremely important milestone, as this is the only body in the world that can help us achieve our goal of peace and stability in our neighborhood. Today, the foundation of the world order, non-use of war, threat of unilateral force, self-determination of people, the sovereign equality and territorial integrity of states, non-interference in their internal affairs, international cooperation. All these ideals are being systematically eroded. International agreements are being flouted and set aside. Renewed great power rivalries are leading to a new arms race. Military occupation and illegal annexations are suppressing the right of human beings to self-determination. We believe the driving force in international relations must be cooperation in accordance with principles of international law and not confrontation and force. We all must emphatically reaffirm our support for multilateralism. The COVID-19 pandemic has illustrated the oneness of humanity. In our interconnected world, no one is safe unless everyone is safe. Locking down to control the pandemic has triggered the worst recession since the Great Depression in the last century. This has hit the poorest countries the hardest, as well as the poor in all the countries. In Pakistan, we realized very early on that if we imposed a strict lockdown, the type that several affluent countries had imposed, we would have more people dying of hunger than the virus. Therefore, we adopted a policy of smart lockdown. Even though a smart lockdown was heavily criticized in the beginning, but thanks to Almighty Allah's grace, we have not only managed to control the virus, stabilize the economy, but most importantly, we have been able to protect the poorest segment of the society from the worst fallout of the lockdown. Today, Pakistan's response is cited among the success stories in controlling and responding to the pandemic. However, we are still not out of the woods, like no country is out of the woods today. Mr. President, we appreciate the G20's official debt suspension initiative and the emergency and rapid financing offered by the IMF, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and UN agencies. This, however, is not enough. The IMF has estimated that developing countries will need over $2.5 trillion to respond and recover from the crisis. The official debt suspension will need to be extended and expanded. Additional debt relief measures will also be needed. Mr. President, this year I must again reiterate the threat posed to mankind due to climate change. Unprecedented fires in Australia, Siberia, California, Brazil, unprecedented flooding in various parts of the world, and record temperatures even in the Arctic Circle. This should make us all worried for our future generations. Pakistan's contribution to carbon emissions is minimal, but it is one of those countries most affected by climate change. Yet we have decided to take the lead as we consider addressing climate change a universal responsibility. We have launched an extremely ambitious program to plant 10 billion trees in the next 3 years as a contribution to mitigating the effects of climate change. Mr. President, the pandemic was an opportunity to bring humanity together. Unfortunately, it has instead fanned nationalism, increased global tensions, and given rise to racial and religious hatred and violence against vulnerable minorities in several places. These trends have also accentuated Islamophobia. Muslims continue to be targeted with impunity in many countries. Our shrines are being destroyed. Our prophet insulted. The Holy Quran burned. And all this is in the name of freedom of speech. The country in the world today where the state sponsors Islamophobia is India. The reason behind this is the RSS ideology that unfortunately rules India today. This extremist ideology was founded in 1920s. The RSS founding fathers were inspired by the Nazis and they adopted the concepts of racial purity and supremacy. While the Nazis' hate was directed at the Jews, The RSS directs it towards the Muslims and to a lesser extent towards the Christians. They believe that India is exclusive for Hindus and others are not equal citizens. The secularism of Gandhi and Nehru has been replaced by the dream of creating a Hindu Rashtra by subjugating, even cleansing India's 200 million Muslims and other minorities. Muslims were falsely blamed, vilified and victimized for spreading the coronavirus. They were denied medical attentions on many occasions. Their businesses were boycotted. Mr. President, for over 71 years, India has illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir against the wishes of the Kashmiri people and in blatant violation of the resolutions of the Security Council and indeed its own commitments. On 5th August last year, India illegally and unilaterally sought to change the status of the occupied territories and deployed additional troops, and a complete curfew was imposed accompanied by a total communications blackout. The international community must investigate these grave violations and prosecute the Indian civil and military personnel involved in state terrorism and serious crimes against humanity being perpetrated with complete impunity. Mr. President, this action is in violation of the UN Charter, Council resolutions and international law, particularly the 4th Geneva Convention. The brave Kashmiri people will never submit to Indian occupation and oppression. The government and people of Pakistan are committed to standing by and supporting the Kashmiri brothers and sisters in the legitimate struggle for self-determination. Mr. President, Pakistan has always called for a peaceful solution. To this end, India must resign the measures it has instituted since 5th August 2019, end its military siege and other gross human rights violation, and agree to resolve the Jammu and Kashmir dispute in accordance with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions and the wishes of the Kashmiri people. Mr. President, Pakistan's desire for peace in our region is also manifest in the efforts to promote a political solution in Afghanistan. Pakistan fully facilitated the process that culminated in the US-Taliban peace agreement on 29 February 2020. Pakistan is deeply gratified that it has fulfilled its part of responsibility. Peace and stability in Afghanistan will open new opportunities for development and regional connectivity. New vistas of cooperation could emerge with Central Asia and beyond. Mr. President, the United Nations remains the best legitimate avenue for collective action in managing international conflicts, fostering peace and security, promoting equitable development and addressing global problems. I urge the Secretary General to take the lead in preventing global conflicts. He should convene summit-level meetings to address regional hotspots and resolve outstanding disputes. The United Nations should be made fully responsive to the challenges of our times. A comprehensive reform of the United Nations, including the Security Council, is essential to promote greater democracy, accountability, transparency and efficiency. Pakistan will continue to participate actively in this process and endeavor with other member states to build a world where conflict is outlawed and equitable prosperity for all pursued in conditions of peace and security. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Now I request Honorable Indian resident to speak a few lines.
Honorable Ministers, senior government officials, representatives of civil society, my colleagues from United Nations Environment, ladies and gentlemen, Namaste. Let me start by reading the United Nations Secretary General's message for World Environment Day this year. Nature is sending us a clear message. We are harming the natural world through our own detriment. Habitat degradation and biodiversity loss are accelerating. Climate disruption is getting worse. Fires, floods, droughts, and superstorms are more frequent and damaging. Oceans are heating and acidifying, destroying coral ecosystems. And now, a new coronavirus is raging, undermining health and livelihoods. To care for humanity must care for nature. We need our entire global community to change course. Let's rethink what we buy and use. Adopt sustainable habits, farming, and business models. Safeguard remaining wild spaces and wildlife, and commit to a green and resilient future. As we work to build back better, let's put nature where it belongs, at the heart of our decision making. On this World Environment Day, it's time for nature. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 has sent shockwaves around the world and shaken our societies and economies. It's destroyed lives, torn families apart, and unleashed untold sufferings. But in addition to its destruction, our COVID-19 lockdowns have given nature a pause, a reprieve from destructive human behaviors. Birds, hundreds of them, including wild birds, have returned. I don't have a garden, but I see nature coming alive all around me. So in the midst of COVID's human sufferings and anxieties, nature has been allowed to breathe. And with that breath, she has brought wonderment and hope. The term new normal is being used a lot these days, portraying both that things will never be the same again and that something should not be the same again. Among the things that should not be the same again is our pre-COVID destructive behavior toward the environment. We all know that the unhealthy relationship we fostered over decades was leading us resolutely towards a dark abyss. We know that the dominant global development model is unsustainable. It's deeply flawed. We know that in the urgency to kickstart national economies, we must use the opportunity. Big strides have been made. There's no question about that. On the environmental front, while the challenges are immense, so is the knowledge, the capacity, the commitment of millions of people across the country. And Indian society is steeped in ancient wisdom from centuries gone by that have taught respect, reverence for the environment, for Mother Earth. It's my ardent hope that India's recovery from COVID-19 will inspire the rest of the world on this front. That India will demonstrate that economic development and environmental preservation are not a zero-sum game, that they can, indeed they must go hand in hand. India's soft power is particularly effective. Look at yoga, meditation. Look at Ayurvedic medicine. Look at Indian blue helmets, India's peacekeepers. Look at Bollywood. Look at your authors, poets, musicians, and much more. India has given the world so much. I hope that harmony between economic activity and the natural environment can soon be added to the list. For India's sake, and for the world. What other country has endured the legal status of a person on a river? A few years ago, the rivers Ganga and Yamuna were accorded the legal status of a person by an Indian court, which effectively means harming or polluting the river is equivalent to harming a person. What other country can claim an elephant sanctuary that dates from 300 BC? What other country's ancient scriptures are so laden with timeless wisdom of the interrelatedness of all living beings? India has shown the world the way on so many fundamentally important areas. Please show us the way on this. It's time for nature. Thank you and happy World Environment Day.
Thank you, Honorable Indian Resident, for your speech. First, I call the distinguished representative of USA.
Good morning, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here in front of you on behalf of my country, the United States of America. The capital of USA is Washington, D.C. The overall climate of USA is temperate with some notable exceptions. Majority of Americans, that is 71%, are Christians, while 6% of the people are non-Christians. Other 23% of the adult population have no religious affiliation. The major political issue of USA is that every year politicians spend a lot of money, more than the government takes, and put it on the national credit card. Hence the bill grows bigger. Now let's watch a small presentation. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation. 75 years ago, the United States stepped forward when this bold new venture known as the United Nations needed a permanent home, and we remain proud to serve as that home to this day. The vast networks of organizations, agencies and functions show that the UN has grown well beyond the vision of its founders and must continue to guide its every action. The United States has played a central role in these successes, not only as the host nation, but as the UN's largest and most reliable funder for all of its 75 years. Thank you.
Thank you, representative. Now I call the ambassador of Russia.
Dobre Utro, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here in front of you on behalf of my country, Russia. The capital of my country is Moscow. The general weather conditions of Russia can be described as warm to hot dry summers and very cold winters with temperatures of -30 degrees Celsius. The major types of flora are Volga Delta and lotus flower. The major types of fauna are snow leopards, reindeers, polar bear, Arctic fox, etc. The religions followed in Russia are Russian Orthodoxy, Orthodox faith, Christianity, Jewish, Buddhism, Islam and Juva religion. The political issues in my country is that Russia saw extreme political upheaval and constitutional reforms announced by President Vladimir Putin, leading to resignation of the government. The impact of Russia in COVID-19 compared to Europe and Asia was delayed. The first Russian was diagnosed on February 17 by Japanese doctors. On March 1st, President Vladimir Putin declared that Russia was entirely under control. Let's all watch a small presentation. I hope you all like this presentation. 75 years ago, on 24th of October in 1945 in San Francisco, an organization of United Nations was created. Many countries signed up for it, and 5 of the countries were permanent members. I am proud to announce that Russia was one of the permanent members. UN was created to stop world wars and human divisions. time to take the great achievement of United Nations as given. However, each step was a true feat, the greatest being the victory over Nazism. Against the background, attempts to revise history look absurd. The world is tired of dividing lines, dividing between us and them. However, UN 75 was a great and open organization for all the countries to participate. Thank you and have a nice day ahead. Spasiba.
Thank you, Ambassador of Russia. Now I call the envoy of France.
Good morning, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here in front of you on behalf of my country, France. The capital of France is Paris. France generally has a temperate climate with cold winters and mild summers. The majority of people in France follow Christianity, while minorities follow Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism and Judaism. The major political issue in France is that the times of government crisis, that is, time when there is no government at all, have totaled over 6 months. Now let us see a small presentation. I hope you all liked the presentation. In 26 July 1945, while the war was still raging in the Pacific, our predecessors agreed on a threefold promise to protect the future generations from the scourge of wars, to affirm human rights and the equality of nations, and to support social progress amid greater freedom. In 75 years of existence, the United Nations organizations, our shared home, has remained true to this promise. From 75 years, France was standing alongside UN for advancing multilateralism and will still help UN in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, the envoy of France. Now I call the ambassador of Ukraine.
Good morning to the UN Secretary General and all the members of UN present over here. It's a proud to stand before you on behalf of my country, United Kingdom. The capital of my country is London. The climate of my country is warm and dry in summer and cold and dry in winter. The main flora and fauna of my country is oak, beech, shrine horse and red deer. The religion followed in my country is Christianity. The other main religion followed in my country are Hinduism, Judaism and Buddhism. Pollution, low pay and poverty are some of my socio-economical issues of my country. The impact of COVID-19 has affected severely on education of children trade, business, some of tourist places, malls, buildings of my country. Let's check a PPT on it. Ever since UK first hosted the first ever UN General Assembly, the United Kingdom has been a key partner every step of the way. The declaration is intended to recommit the member of the United Nations to its founding principle and to global cooperation for peace, sustainable development and human rights. It has potential to pave the way reform of our international system to better address the change of the future and the task of building back better after COVID-19 pandemic. It would allow member states to demonstrate how they intend to answer the challenge of creating the world we want and the UN we need.
Thank you, Ambassador of UK. Now I call the distinguished representative of China.
The UN Secretary General and all the members of UN present over here. It's a privilege to stand in front of you on behalf of my country, China. The capital of China is Beijing. The climate of China is temperate. The major flora and fauna found in China are silver fir, Chinese fir, golden larch and bamboo. The major fauna are giant panda, red panda, Chinese river dolphin. Buddhism is the major religion followed in China. Unemployment, inequality, health and poverty are some socio-economical issues of my country. There are total 92,015 COVID-19 cases in my country. This pandemic has completely severed my country. Let's see a small presentation on it. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. China was the first to sign with UN, the founding member of UN and the only developing country that takes the permanent seat on the Security Council. China will continue to be a true follower of multilateralism. It will stay active, engaged in the Golden Government system. It will firmly uphold the UN-centered international system by the international rules. China will firmly defend the UN central role in the international affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, representative of China. Now I call the envoy of Azerbaijan.
Good morning, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here in front of you on behalf of my country, Azerbaijan. The capital of my country is Baku. Azerbaijan enjoys the continental climate influenced with warm summer and very cold and dry winter. The main religion of Azerbaijan is Islam. Few people also follow religions like Judaism, Christianity and Zoroastrianism. The name Azerbaijan means land of eternal fire, which comes from Zoroastrians who pray to fire. Currently there is ethnic and territorial conflict and war with Armenia over a disputed land of Nagorno-Karabakh. The COVID-19 pandemic has not left us untouched and has its toll with 740 deaths and more than 50,000 positive cases till date. Similar to other countries, we had preventive measures like lockdown, shutdown and cancellation of several sporting events during this pandemic. Now, I will share a short presentation over my country.
Çok sağ olun.
Hope you enjoyed the presentation. To celebrate 75 years of the United Nations, the UN office at Baku had recently held its UN 75 initiatives on 21st September 2020 to face the global challenges like pandemic, climate changes, and many other issues. Now, I will end by saying thanks to all of you in my Azerbaijani language. That is, Chaksalan.
Thank you, Envoy of Azerbaijan.
Now I call the distinguished representative of Barbados.
Good morning, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates and ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to be here on behalf of my country, Barbados. The capital of my country is Bridgetown. The general weather conditions in Barbados is warm and sunny. Majority of Barbadians follow Christianity. Islam, the Baha'i and Judaism religion are also followed in my country. The socio-economic condition of Barbados is dependent on sugarcane cultivation, tourism and related activities. Now let's watch a small presentation. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation. Our commitment in UN 75 is renewable energy generation to reach an indicative target of about 29% of all electricity consumption to be generated from renewable sources by 2029. Thank you.
Thank you, representative of Barbados.
Now I call the distinguished representative of Greece.
Kalimera, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to represent my country, Greece. The capital of my country is Athens, which is the largest city in the Greece. Greece is located in southern East Europe. The climate of my country is Mediterranean, with summers that are usually hot and dry, winters that are quite cold and wet. Now let's talk about flora and fauna. Of the 4,992 species of higher plants, about 742 are endemic to the country. Most common vegetations are forest of oak, chestnut and pine. Fauna are plentiful, but bear, wildcat, jackal and fox still exist in many sparsely populated areas. National animal of my country is dolphin. National bird of my country is phoenix. National flower is bear's branch. Major religion of my country is Christianity. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic. The first case in Greece appeared on February 26, 2020. We managed to observe the health system shock and decrease the case fatality ratio of COVID-19. But early proactive and strict interventions, but the threat still looms and we strive to continuously work on all areas to fight against COVID pandemic. Now let's watch a small presentation about my country. Enjoyed the presentation. The values and principles at heart of the United Nations matter as much today as they did. Greece signed the UN Charter in 1945. Those values of peace and security, equality, human rights and self-determination, and those principles of justice and the rule of law are at the core of what it means to be Greek. The challenges we faced in 2020 may be different from those of the post-war years, but in many respects, they are just significant. Just as the meme is. So let's meet, let's talk, let's seek a mutually acceptable solution. The future we want is mirrored in the UN. We need, which is the UN. We should tirelessly keep building, says Filisto.
Thank you, representative of Greece. Now I call the distinguished representative of Laos.
Good morning, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here on behalf of my country, Laos. The capital of Laos is Vientiane. Laos has a mostly tropical savanna climate.
A tropical monsoon and humid subtropical climate also occurs in places. 66% of Laotians are Theravada Buddhist, 1.5% Christian, 0.1% Muslim, 0.1% Jewish, and 32.3% are other or traditional, mostly practitioners of Satsana faith. One of the major political issues of Laos is that a fluctuating exchange rate and the drop of foreign currency reserves has caused price hikes among many household products and services, impeding economic growth and driving up the cost of living. Now, let's watch a small presentation. Hope you like the presentation. Now, Thongloun Sisoulith, Prime Minister of the Lao People's Democratic Republic, said that the current global environment is very different from what it was 7 decades ago. Yet, the primary objectives and principles set out in the Charter of the United Nations remains highly relevant. All member states must jointly promote the noble cause of the United Nations, help to improve its mechanism and ensure that it fulfills its mandate and duties effectively. The Lao People's Democratic Republic stands ready to work with other member states to ensure that the United Nations carries out its mandate to promote peace, development and the prosperity of all countries. Khop chai.
Thank you, representative of Laos. Now I call the ambassador of Bangladesh.
Good morning, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here in front of you on behalf of my country, Bangladesh. The capital of Bangladesh is Dhaka. The overall climate of Bangladesh is typical monsoon. The majority of Banglis, that are 89%, follow the religion of Sunni Muslims. 10% of people here follow Hinduism. The rest of the percentage are Christians and Buddhists. The major political issues of Bangladesh is that Bangladesh is now near to 1 million Rohingya refugees, a population which includes both recent refugees and those which are there from long. These continuation of refugees from Myanmar are creating a severe strain on humanitarian and government aid agents. Now, let's see a small presentation. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation. The noble ideals enshrined in the United Nations Charter are very ideal for which millions of people have made the supreme sacrifice. The Bangli nation fully commits itself to the building of a world order in which the aspiration for all men for peace and justice will be realized. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador of Bangladesh. Now I call the envoy of Finland.
Good morning, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here in front of you on behalf of my country, Finland. The capital of Finland is Helsinki. Finland is a country located in the northern Europe. Finland gained its independence on 6th December 1917 from the Duchy of Sweden. The present national flag was adopted as national flag in 1980. Cross in the flag depicts the region of the country. The blue color depicts 1,000 lakes and sky, and the white color depicts snow-covered land. The national animal of Finland is brown bear. The national bird of Finland is swan, and the national flower of Finland is lily of the valley. The staple food of Finland is fish, potatoes, rice or pasta. Finland is predominantly a Christian nation. Now let's see a short presentation on my country, Finland. You have enjoyed my presentation. In the UN conference, the President of Finland said that Finland will remain fully committed to the United Nations and its principles. Lastly, I want to tell you some amazing facts on my country. The happiest country in the world, the second least corrupt country in the world, and the highest annual milk consumption in the world. Kittos to everyone.
Thank you, Envoy of Finland. Now I call the Ambassador of Ethiopia.
Good morning, Distinguished Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to be here in front of you all on behalf of my country, Ethiopia. The capital of my country is Addis Ababa. Ethiopian climate varies according to the different topographical regions. The Central Plateau has a moderate climate. Heavy rainfall occurs in most of the country during June, July and August. Ethiopia, the country on the Horn of Africa, lies between the equator and Tropic of Cancer. The main religion of Ethiopia is Christianity. Nearly 2/3 of the population are Christians and 1/3 are Muslims. Ethiopians are mainly of Abrahamic religions. The name Ethiopia means robbers of hearts. Ethiopia, the land of origins, is the cradle of humanity where we first walked on 2 legs. It is the origin of one of life's greatest pleasures, coffee. Ethiopia's gift to the world. Now, let's watch a small presentation that I have made on my country. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation. The COVID-19 pandemic poses clear threats to our strong economic growth, tourism, exports, imports, etc. At the outset of the pandemic, the country's first democratic elections in August 2020 was postponed. Ethiopia is fully committed to the UN 75. Abiy Ahmed Ali, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, said the country's Green Legacy initiative is always ready to help the poor and needy countries. Last but not the least, I would like you to tell thank you in my own Amharic language. That is, Ame Shekina Lehu.
Thank you, Ambassador of Ethiopia. Now I call the Ambassador of Nigeria.
Good morning, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here on behalf of my country, Nigeria. The capital of Nigeria is Abuja. The overall climate of Nigeria it is having tropical climate with variable rainy and dry seasons depending on location. It is hot and wet most of the year in southeast but dry in the southwest and further inland. There are 51.6% Muslim, 46.9% Christian, 9% traditionalist, while 5% are unspecified. The major political issues of Nigeria are: it has many roadblocks to a strong democracy in Nigeria at all levels of government. Conflict triggered by political competition and communal, ethnic, religious rivalries possess many threats to democracy. Now let's watch a small presentation. hope you all enjoyed the presentation. On 7 July 2020, UNGA President Tijani Mohammad Bande circulated a letter informing that the consensus on the text of declaration had been reached. Tijani Mohammad Bande will transmit the final draft to the President of 75th UNGA session to prepare the text for adoption at the high level meeting of Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador of Nigeria. Now I call the Ambassador of Ecuador.
Good morning, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here in front of you on behalf of my country, Ecuador. It is also called Republic of Ecuador. The capital of my country, Ecuador, is Quito. The current president of Ecuador is Lenin Moreno. Ecuador experiences a humid climate as it lies on the equator. Ecuador has 10% of the world's plant species and 8% of the world's animal species. The national flower of Ecuador is rose and the national animal is Andean condor. When it comes to the religion, the Ecuadorian society is relatively homogeneous, with Christianity being the primary religion. The language of Ecuador is Spanish. Impact of COVID-19 is high on the economy of Ecuador. Death rate of Ecuador is minimum in comparison to other countries. Now let's watch a small presentation. Enjoyed. Now I am going to tell about UN 75 and Ecuador. On UN 75, Lenin Moreno stressed some issues like alarming inequality, nuclear confrontation, devastation from climatic phenomena, migration crisis, and etc. At last, I am going to tell thank you in my Ecuadorian language, that is, gracias.
Thank you, Ambassador of Ecuador. Now I call the Ambassador of Uganda.
Good morning, Honorable Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to be here in front of you in behalf of my country, Uganda. The capital of Uganda is Kampala. Uganda has a temperate climate and experiences hot days and cold nights. About 4/5 of the population is Christian and others are Islam. The main political issue of Uganda is it is a presidential republic and has a multi-party system where the power is given to the government as well as the National Assembly, which really creates problem for the people of the Uganda. Now let's watch a small presentation. hope you liked the presentation. Uganda promised maintaining international peace and security, promoting human rights, focusing on social economical development as well as natural disaster and armed conflict, and also protecting the environment of Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador of Uganda. Now I would like to call Alisha Didi for giving the vote of thanks.